Alright, let's get right into it. Number 10. In 2020, a team combining astrophysics and neuroscience directly compared the large-scale structure of the universe to the human brain, and found the two systems share a mathematically similar network structure, unlike almost anything else ever measured. Astrophysicist Franco Vazza at the University of Bologna, working with neurosurgeon Alberto Folletti at the University of Verona, published a comparative study in the journal Frontiers in Physics in 2020, directly analyzing the cosmic web, the vast network of galaxy filaments connecting matter across the universe, against the structure of neuronal networks in the human cerebellum. Their analysis found startling statistical similarities in clustering patterns, network distribution, and the overall proportion of connective pathways versus empty space, with roughly 30% of mass in both systems concentrated in active nodes connected by thinner filaments. Vazza was careful to state the comparison was structural, not evidence of literal cosmic consciousness, but the fact that gravity and neurons, governed by completely different physical laws, independently produce nearly identical branching network geometries remains one of the strangest coincidences ever formally measured between biology and the largest structure in existence. Number 9. Physicists have confirmed that what we call empty space is never actually empty at all, but is instead constantly seething with particles flickering in and out of existence, a state of perpetual restless activity closer to something metabolic than something inert. Quantum field theory, developed throughout the 20th century, predicts that the vacuum is filled with virtual particles, pairs that spontaneously appear and annihilate within incomprehensibly brief timeframes, a consequence of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Physicist Hendrik Casimir predicted in 1948 that this activity should produce a measurable force between two closely spaced metal plates, caused by an imbalance in the virtual particles allowed to exist in the narrow gap. Physicist Steve Lamoureux at Yale University confirmed the Casimir effect experimentally with high precision in 1997, proving the vacuum genuinely behaves as an active, fluctuating medium rather than a static void. Some physicists, including Nobel laureate Frank Wilczek, have described the vacuum in his 2008 book, The Lightness of Being, as a dynamic substance more resembling a restless material than empty nothingness, a description that places space itself far closer to constant, low-level activity than classical physics ever assumed. Number 8. A Belgian chemist won the Nobel Prize in 1977 for proving that systems far from equilibrium can spontaneously organize themselves into complex, ordered structures, a process that governs everything from chemical reactions to hurricanes and appears to operate identically at every scale of the universe, including the birth of galaxies. Chemist Ilya Prigogine, working at the Free University of Brussels, published extensive research throughout the 1960s and 1970s on what he termed dissipative structures, systems that maintain complex organization by continuously processing energy flowing through them. Work that earned him the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1977, specifically for demonstrating that order can emerge spontaneously from disorder without violating the laws of thermodynamics. Prigogine's framework has since been applied by astrophysicists studying star formation and galaxy structure, since giant clouds of gas collapsing under gravity display the exact same mathematical self-organizing behavior found in living cells, weather systems, and Prigogine's original chemical experiments. It means the same underlying principle, responsible for a living cell organizing itself against entropy, may also be the reason stars, galaxies, and the entire structure of the universe organize themselves into complexity, rather than remaining a featureless, uniform cloud of gas. Number 7. In 1980, a physicist who had spent decades studying quantum mechanics under Albert Einstein proposed that the universe should not be understood as a collection of separate objects at all, but as a single, undivided, continuously flowing whole, a concept he described using language typically reserved for living, organic systems. Physicist David Bohm, who had worked directly with Einstein at Princeton in the late 1940s before developing his own interpretation of quantum mechanics, published his theory of the implicate order in his 1980 book, Wholeness and the Implicate Order, proposing that everything in the universe, matter, energy, space, and consciousness, emerges from a deeper, unified, unbroken process he called the Holomovement. Bohm explicitly rejected the idea of the universe as a machine made of separate parts, arguing instead that reality behaves more like a single flowing river, or a living organism, constantly unfolding new forms from an underlying wholeness rather than being assembled piece by piece. While mainstream physics has never adopted Bohm's philosophical framework as an experimentally confirmed model, his description of the universe as one continuous, self-generating, flowing process remains one of the most serious scientific attempts ever made to describe reality using language closer to biology than mechanics. Number 6. physicist Lee Smolin proposed in 1992 that black holes do not simply destroy matter, but instead give birth to entirely new universes, each one carrying slightly mutated physical constants inherited from its parent, a process functionally identical to biological reproduction and natural selection, operating at the scale of entire universes. Smolin, then working at Syracuse University and later at the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics, expanded this theory in his 1997 book, The Life of the Cosmos, proposing that universes which happen to produce physical constants favorable to forming large numbers of stars will also produce large numbers of black holes, and therefore large numbers of offspring universes, causing those specific constants to become statistically dominant across an ever-expanding multiverse over cosmic time. This model, called cosmological natural selection, was deliberately designed by Smolin, using the same evolutionary logic Charles Darwin applied to living organisms in 1859, applied instead to entire universes competing to reproduce through the mechanism of black hole formation. If Smolin's theory is correct, our own universe is not simply an object that exists, but the literal offspring of a prior universe, produced through a process that mirrors biological reproduction down to its underlying mathematical structure. Number 5. A growing number of serious philosophers and physicists have proposed that consciousness may not be something the brain uniquely produces at all, but a fundamental property of matter itself, meaning every particle in the universe, including the empty space between galaxies, could possess some faint, primitive form of experience. Philosopher Galen Strawson at the University of Texas at Austin published an influential paper titled Realistic Monism in the Journal of Consciousness Studies in 2006, arguing that panpsychism, the view that consciousness is a basic, fundamental feature of physical reality rather than something that mysteriously emerges only inside complex brains, is actually more scientifically consistent than the alternative, since physics has never explained how unconscious matter could ever produce subjective experience in the first place. Neuroscientist Christoph Koch, formerly chief scientific officer at the Allen Institute for Brain Science, has publicly stated in interviews and his own published work that he takes panpsychism seriously as a genuine scientific hypothesis rather than mysticism, precisely because it avoids the unexplained leap from unconscious atoms to conscious minds. If panpsychism is correct, the distinction between living and non-living matter becomes far less absolute, and the vast empty stretches of space between stars would not be truly empty of experience at all, but filled with an extraordinarily faint, dispersed form of the same fundamental property that makes up human consciousness. Number 4. A neuroscientist developed a mathematical formula in 2004 specifically designed to measure consciousness, and the formula does not require a biological brain at all, meaning any sufficiently complex interconnected system, including one built from stars, gas, and gravity, could theoretically qualify. Neuroscientist Giulio Tononi at the University of Wisconsin-Madison first formalized integrated information theory in a 2004 paper published in BMC Neuroscience, proposing that consciousness corresponds directly to a specific mathematical property called phi, representing how much integrated information a system generates beyond what its individual parts could produce separately, a value that can in principle be calculated for any physical system whatsoever. Tononi's theory has gained serious traction among physicists and neuroscientists specifically because it makes no requirement that a conscious system be made of neurons, or even be biological at all, only that it possess a sufficiently high degree of integrated information processing. While Tononi's own research remains focused on biological brains, the theory's own mathematics leaves open, at least in principle, the unsettling possibility that any large, deeply interconnected physical system generating enough integrated information, potentially including the vast, interconnected structure of the cosmic web itself, could register some non-zero, calculable degree of consciousness under the theory's own formal definition. Number 3. Physicist Andrei Linde discovered in 1986 that the same process responsible for creating our own universe does not happen once and stop, but continues indefinitely, endlessly spawning new universes in a process physicists themselves have chosen to describe, using explicitly reproductive language. Linde, then working at the Lebedev Physical Institute in Moscow, published a paper titled Eternally Existing Self-Reproducing Chaotic Inflationary Universe, demonstrating that inflation, the exponential expansion evolution following the Big Bang, first proposed by physicist Alan Guth in 1980, does not end everywhere simultaneously, but continues forever in most regions of space, spawning countless new, expanding bubble universes. The terminology Linde and subsequent physicists have used to describe this process, self-reproducing, budding, and inflationary offspring, was not chosen accidentally, but because the underlying mathematics genuinely resembles a biological reproductive process, with regions of inflating space continuously generating new, independent universes the same way a living organism generates new offspring. It means the leading scientific model for how our own universe began describes cosmic structure using language borrowed directly and deliberately from biology, because the physicists studying it found no better way to describe what the mathematics was actually showing them. Number 2. In 1972, a British scientist proposed that Earth itself behaves as a single, self-regulating living system, and decades later, cosmologists studying the impossibly precise physical constants governing the entire universe have found themselves reaching for the exact same self-regulating framework to explain existence on a cosmic scale. Chemist James Lovelock, working with microbiologist Lynn Margulis at Boston University, formally proposed the Gaia hypothesis in 1972, arguing that Earth's atmosphere, oceans, and biosphere interact as a single self-regulating system that actively maintains conditions suitable for life. A proposal initially dismissed by many scientists but eventually incorporated into mainstream Earth systems science through decades of confirmed climate feedback research. Separately, physicists studying the extraordinary fine-tuning of the universe's physical constants, first highlighted by Nobel laureate Steven Weinberg's 1987 prediction of the cosmological constant, have noted that the universe behaves as though its fundamental parameters are precisely balanced to permit the existence of stars, chemistry, and observers, a balance so improbable that some researchers have informally described the phenomenon using Gaia-like language, a cosmos seemingly self-regulated toward producing exactly the conditions necessary for its own observation, without any confirmed physical mechanism ever identified to explain why. Number 1. In 1979, one of the most respected physicists of the 20th century published a paper arguing that intelligent life, given enough time, will not simply exist within the universe, but will eventually expand to actively reorganize matter and energy across cosmic scales, meaning the universe itself, currently mostly lifeless, could genuinely become a living system in its own right. Physicist Freeman Dyson, at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, published a paper titled Time Without End: Physics and Biology in an Open Universe in the journal Reviews of Modern Physics in 1979, calculating that intelligent life, if it survives long enough and continues expanding, could theoretically continue processing information and directing energy indefinitely, even as the universe grows cold and sparse over trillions of years. Dyson's calculations suggested that life is not necessarily bound to remain a rare, isolated phenomenon confined to small planets, but could, in principle, eventually spread outward and begin actively organizing matter and energy across entire galaxies, effectively transforming currently lifeless cosmic structures into extensions of living, information processing systems. If Dyson's speculation is correct, the universe is not simply a dead, mechanical backdrop against which life occasionally happens to arise, but a system with the latent physical capacity to eventually become alive across its entire structure, meaning the difference between a living universe and the one we currently observe may not be a matter of fundamental impossibility, but simply a matter of time. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now, and make sure to subscribe.